In our isolation, in the wilderness, God pursues us. Let me explain what this means. Verse 7, the angel of the Lord found her. This is Hagar. Because what happened, Sarai kicked her out of the home. She was upset with Hagar, made her go into the wilderness. This pregnant woman, all right, is now in the wilderness with a huge possibility to die with a baby. And so now the angel of the Lord found her. And the word found here that was used is actually the word to pursue. Found is not a strong word, because found is like, oh yeah, I found her. We bumped into each other in the mall. In SM Aura, I saw her. I found her. But this one is to pursue. The word that was used here, God pursued Hagar. And so that was what was happening here. And so in our isolation and even in the wilderness, God pursues us. Now, wilderness is an interesting place in Scripture, because wilderness is a place where a lot of encounters with God happens. Remember Moses, a burning bush. Jacob wrestled with an angel in the wilderness. It was David, while running away from King Saul, was in the wilderness. And many times God brings you to a place of desolation because He wants you to encounter Him in a different way. You see, wilderness is an interesting place, and God has you there for a reason. Don't despise the time in the wilderness. Embrace it. It's perfectly okay, because God's with you right there. And He says, behold, I'm doing something new. And in the place of wilderness, it's a hard reset and a fresh start for you. Behold, I'm doing something new. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? It will make a way in the desert. I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. You see, God is doing something new when He brings you to the desert. He wants you there for Himself. Verse 8. He said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. A couple things about this verse. Number one, he calls her by name. And this is significant because God knows you by your name. You're not just a face in the crowd. You're not just one statistic in X number of millions in the Philippines. God knows every single one of us, and He knows you by name. That's significant because you're not just a number. You're the child of God. And so He says, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And normally when there's encounters in Scripture, specifically in the desert, or when God encounters a person, usually there's a question that He asks. Now, you look at this. God asks a question. My question is this: did God not know? Did God not know where she came from and where she was going? Of course not. God is omniscient. He knows everything. He knows the beginning to the end. But why did God have to answer or ask Hagar? You see, many times God asks us so that we can acknowledge where we are. And when we can see that we're lost. Only when we realize we're lost can we be found. That's what was happening here. Now, Genesis 16:11. And the angel of the Lord said to Hagar, behold, you're pregnant, you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. This is powerful, that in our tribulation, in our affliction, in our time in the wilderness, God hears you. God hears your cry. God hears your plea. God hears your supplication. And sometimes, when you're alone, you feel alone. And you think you are alone, but you're not. God's there. He listens. He hears us. And that is a comfort. That is a comfort.